How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. Thanks,
Good.
Sean.
Excellent, and I can hear you. We'll ask Bob to just speak up very loud today. As as with these things, there's always some kind of technical challenge. It wouldn't be AV, right? Unless we didn't have some sort of AV related challenge to us as we do these things. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, on our Smart Buildings and Pro AV discussion today. Happy to be joined by Bob Snyder, Content Chairman, Editor-in-Chief of Channel Media Europe. Sean Wargo, Senior Director of Market Intelligence of AVIXA as well. Hope you guys were able to hear some of the comments that I made earlier in today's sessions about opportunities around smart building. As I kind of noted during that, smart building is a big, broad, nebulous concept. It's more of a vision statement than a definitional reality in a lot of cases, since there's so many bits and pieces to what this opportunity entails. So I'm happy to be joined by Bob today, who kind of focuses on this space pretty closely and can share some of the latest trends, etc. He and I are going to talk. We're going to riff. We could fill the whole time. Just one caveat: we will be stopping at about 5 of the hour to allow Bob and myself to go on to some other engagements today. But type in your questions on the right if you have anything to say. You can certainly, if you're brave, you can join us in video fashion. But yeah, Bob, so let's talk about smart building. What kinds of things are you seeing out there in this broad landscape, especially during pandemic? What's it looking like? What's the opportunities right now versus future? Would be great to kind of hear what you're seeing.
Sure. I think, like everything, smart building, decreased in 2020. But the interesting thing about smart building is the investment in new technology for smart building actually went up during the pandemic. So this means that there's a healthy, attitude towards, the job that smart building has to do in the future, and to get people back to work and back in the offices. The technologies that are driving a lot of them at the moment are IoT related. There's a big influx of new innovation that's kind of leading the pack. But there's also still constant innovation in things as boring and as traditional as HVAC and building controls. People are coming up with different models and different technologies and innovations. It's quite an exciting space, really.
Yeah, for sure. I think the IoT theme is one. I was in my presentation today. I was talking about this category we call streaming media and storage device. Essentially, a lot of the back-end systems that allow connectivity, etc. I was theorizing that in this time, especially, we're seeing facilities managers, building operators, corporations kind of investing in perhaps some of that back-end systems to essentially support this remote work, content distribution, all the things that have become so much more important in the 20th century building, as somebody's calling out. So that's kind of what you're seeing as well out there.
Yeah, I think a lot of the trends, like in other parts of AV, were simply amplified by the pandemic and accelerated. So we have this trend where companies are becoming publishers. They're incorporating all the activities that our publishing companies used to have, in terms of content managers, delivery systems, and they're at the point where they're so conscious of the outside communication that they become even more conscious of internal communication, which is a nice twist to it. So that's a positive for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. It's a solution area for us too. In our industry kind of definitions, we look at content distribution as a solution, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's a trend that we've talked a lot about as well. You could say it's democratization of content creation, of video content creation, especially. I did some of that myself last year. We were doing a weekly survey out to our membership, which just sounds daunting now that I think about how much time that takes. But we did a video every time, and it was me kind of just, camera setup, a microphone, and we push those videos out. And it seems like that has become so much more important. I wonder, one way in which smart building or building might have changed, office space may have changed in this reality. Do you think that there is now more need as we go forward to potentially have some kind of broadcast content capture space within within an office building, they could serve lots of purposes. But if companies, enterprises become broadcasters, so to speak, you would think they might want to invest in something better than this kind of just very basic, USB camera, headphone sort of thing. Is that a part of smart building in the future, you think?
Definitely, with the larger organizations, they're going to have that type of facility in a building or on a campus somewhere. It's no doubt that they want to control and to improve their direct line to the world. And I think that here we are. We're actually in a perfect spot, Sean. So we're on both ends now, because we've got the end that the pandemic is creating a need to communicate with the outside world directly, because a lot of your routes to markets are just totally screwed up. So you have the need to communicate outside. And then on the other side of the smart building, we have the investment in the technology to help people get into doors and be safe in the building. Those are the two ends that are the hottest, and they're like two ends of a piece of log burning at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it is. So somebody even put this idea, and I think you're talking about it as well. Just to summarize, are we at the tipping point for a lot of industries in the value chain, architecture, engineering, construction? I would add to that the technology aspects that you're kind of summarizing. Pro AV wouldn't have traditionally thought of itself as heavy into building infrastructure, front end interactivity, those kinds of things. But if anything, the pandemic has taught us to be innovative and go where the opportunity is. And so, yes, companies, the bigger integrators, AVISPL or others, may have had their hands in this, but I think you're seeing the smaller integrator also get more involved in that early design phase, the engineering, the construction, the vision of the building, the build out of all the multiple points of interactivity. And that's a key theme, right? There are so many more points of interactivity now in a building, especially as accelerated by pandemic, from front door, symptom checkers, checkpoint Charlie, I guess you could call it in a way, for as we go back, it needs to tell us, well, these are the guidelines and this is what we expect, and may do symptom checking. And then throughout, digital signs to wayfind to information, and then within space, the remote connectivity and content distribution. So to me, yes, a tipping point, an inflection point, a massive opportunity going forward for sure is what we're kind of seeing out there. One interesting stat we saw, Bob, that I'm curious if you've seen the same. So we looked at data that around construction and refurb, and as you would expect, recessionary periods, the first thing to go is typically new construction, and that kind of makes sense. We've seen a little bit of a fall off in new construction. What we have not seen is actually rents decline here in North America, at least. So it seems as though companies for now have at least held on to their leases and are kind of waiting to see what happens with how many people come back, how they could repurpose space. So while there is this rumor that office spaces are going to be smaller and do we need offices anymore? I wonder about your perspective on this as long-term. Where are we going? Is the office still relevant? Does it just change in nature? Those kinds of things. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think the first thing you have to bear in mind, Sean, is we have a big cultural difference between Europe and America in terms of some of these things. For example, in America, we recognize that small business is a driving force, and maybe the definition of small changes slightly between the large market and here, but a lot of our small businesses live in the same building that their business is. That is, if you go down the street to a fritter, or a baker, they live in that building that they're housing, as their business. And so the small business, has a slightly different attitude. The other different attitude is the culture. We're not as mobile as Americans are here. People don't pick up where their family has been for generations and say, gee, I'm going to go out to the west coast of Belgium and hang out. It's so in terms of offices, I think people in Europe are going to be less reluctant to give them up, but they're going to try to repurpose them and make sure that they suit properly, which again means that there's a lot of opportunity for integrators to help come in and sort out those issues, and how are we going to do this now, and what type of space is it, and should it be digitally enabled space, which is the general trend. And one last point is our retrofit. The last number I think I heard was close to 75% of the buildings that we have are retrofit. They're not new buildings. We tend to use buildings a lot longer and preserve them.
Yeah, for sure. There's been theories out in in trying to look at opportunity for Pro AV and measuring the potential going forward, that you watch new construction, but our research as well has kind of shown that actually it's retrofit, repurpose, remodel. That's the bigger and more sustainable portion of this, because there's lots of building real estate. I imagine this is even more the case in Europe, where you have established building. There's not a lot of new land to build on in many parts of Europe. And increasingly, that's the case in some parts of the U.S. too, where population center, unless you're going to keep expanding outwards, which then makes it harder and harder for people to kind of get into the office. So retrofit becomes important. And I think you heard this on some of the panels this morning. Julian Phillips too was talking about that, of the integrator's involvement. Obviously he's from a larger integrator, and kind of they have their hands in that too. But I imagine that helping companies figure out what to do as they come back is not just a big integrator question. It's a regional local player who's trying to account for local custom, local preference, local work style, all those sorts of things, and understands the technology. I'm wondering what you're hearing about in terms of, say, product innovation and new options, new technology options to help realize this vision, of hybrid models, accounting for and enabling better connection to remote workforce. I think a lot of us have been saying that we went through a first round investment now, 2020. We solved some problems. Education, great example. They had disruption. They had to spool up, invest up. But the question is, how do we make it even better from here? Because, right, we're not done. This is not the be all end all experience that we have now. So I'm wondering what's on the horizon. What are you hearing about in terms of, say, technology for future?
Well, I think we're in a hotbed of technology in the smart building across many different areas, but just to focus on some of the first, I think I have to, Sean, say the interesting thing about smart building is the fact that it's been previously siloed and nobody owns that integration piece. And all of the stakeholders, whether it's the building owner or the commercial real estate people that are involved, or whether it's the people that come in as tenants, they're all looking for solutions. They're looking for people that can handle as much as possible of it. So I try to tell a lot of the Pro AV integrators that the scary thing is if you think you're going to become a master systems integrator overnight and take it all on, you don't have to do that. You just have to look at what's closest to your skill set and take it one by one until you get to a point. If you're a larger integrator, you can do more. But if you're a typical integrator, you just look for what's closest to your skill set, and gradually, piece by piece, get more familiar with the neighboring technology and start to bring that into your regular portfolio, and you'll grow. I think that's the exciting thing about it.
Let's explore that a little bit. So for a lot of companies, they were involved in hanging displays, putting in audio components, those kinds of things. What do you have a recommendation? What do you see as kind of the closest? What's the most adjacent to that? I kind of have some in my mind, but I'm curious what what your thought is. We may have touched
Well,
on one already earlier
sure.
in our conversation today.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number, but let's just start with the fact that coming in the pandemic, all that signage in the corporate lobby now becomes part of the first line of defense, to turn the building into a safer place. So anybody that's used to that is now in a position to slide into access control.
Hmm.
And one of the companies that comes to mind is the company in America, One Screen, that makes it's a floor standing digital kiosk that has artificial intelligence as well as mask recognition and temperature taking. And in the lobby of a school or a corporate office, it's a first line of defense, and yet it also carries messages. And the people who are in the reception somewhere, even if there's no physical reception area, can talk to the people at the door and say, "Hey, you don't have your mask on.
Right.
Please put your mask on." Or can direct them and say, "Look, you don't need to walk through the whole building. Would you just go straight there and take this way?" So those are that is and a lot of companies, manufacturers are trying to help in that by bringing different related technologies and products into the digital signage and the kiosk area in order to give integrators that opportunity.
Mm, definitely, it's a great one. Digital signage. There's so much wrapped around that one of the things we've been talking about is digital signs are a point of interaction. In a larger, say, content distribution model, right? So a sign is just one more touch point. So related to what you're talking about, I think is if you're in digital signage now and you're hanging displays for just, let's say, content that's locally stored right at the point of the sign, your next step is, well, how do I interconnect multiple signs and share and then create interactivity, and then maybe even get into data analytics, utilization, traffic monitoring. There's a lot of other stuff that kind of tie into that as a creative organization. One thing I've even heard of is, content as a service as part of an extension off digital signage. Which brings up the bigger conversation of managed services and recurring revenue opportunity. It seems to me that's one of the best promises of smart building is the smart idea. If we kind of pull it back into residential, when on the consumer side, when they're selling TVs, we had smart TVs coming out. But really what we all know that is, it's connected. It's connected out to a broader set of content. So smart to me is, it's that opportunity as an integrator to think beyond just local, a locally installed, a hyper local, meaning one room, one point of interaction, to multiple, and then you extend out from there. That seems to be kind of the promise, right, of what we're talking about.
Well, if you think about the audio video, heydays, I mean, we were so sophisticated. We'd go into a room and we'd tell you about, its ability to absorb sound, its ability to handle video, and we knew all the mechanics of the room. It's just we never got to the point where we figured out the room is in a building, and there's a lot more things we can do with our background. I was talking yesterday to a company called Sound Intelligence, and they make software that has a tremendous database of recorded sound, so they can tell you in the corporate lobby, for example, if someone's being aggressive. They can tell you if there's a gunshot. They can tell you if there's a car alarm going off in the car park. But with that sort of product, a company like that has no existing channels. And what an opportunity that is for our people who know audio and who know, the lobby, to say, gee, okay, this is something new that I can get in on, and it's an opportunity that is certainly going to take me somewhere, compared to, some of the things that are flat these days.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we are at our time with you, Bob. I do want to respect your schedule today, and I'll answer that last question as we kind of sign off. There's one about huddle rooms with interactive display, video conferencing versus the connect from desk kind of option. And I think we like to say here at AVIXA, it's a yes and, right? I mean, there's need for both. I think absolutely, as we're hearing about, as we go back in some fashion to workplace, there will be people wanting to huddle, to gather in small group, large group, etc., but need to account for the remote person in perhaps and hopefully a more engaging way. At the same time, yes, there will be those from work desk, from individual office that will to connect, enable them to connect in. So I think that's the beauty of this, that yes and, that hybridization, that has expanded the number of places that we actually have to account for and accommodate in our vision for future. So clearly a lot of opportunity here within this broader opportunity. Thank you so much, Bob. Good luck with everything today on your side, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you.
All right. Well, bye-bye, all, and join us next month for our Rise Spotlight on digital signage. We look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.